So this is an album, a pretty long album. In fact, it's Taeyeon's third full-length album that came out last year, and I thought it was pretty good. This is also an album, BTS's anthology album that came out last year. It's a full-length album, very, very long, includes basically all of their main Korean comebacks and some B-sides they chose. Finally, this is Dreamcatcher's most recent mini-album, the one that had Vision on it, and it's smaller than the other ones, but it's still relatively large for an album. Now, why is it that I just showed you 3 albums that are completely different from one another? One of them is a large anthology album, one of them is a full-length album, and another one is a mini-album. All of them also came out in the same year, which was last year in 2022. Now, let me show you the INVU album, but the much smaller version, the blue version. This is considerably smaller than the other one, and this is even smaller than Dreamcatcher's album. I showed you these albums and even emphasized the Taeyeon size difference because I believe that K-pop is primarily visual and actually less about the music. And it's always been this way. K-pop is an industry that revolves around its idols and the way it presents itself rather than the actual music. Not saying that the music is bad, but it's definitely second fiddle. And now that social media is larger than ever, platforms like Instagram and TikTok, K-pop has started to market itself towards those platforms instead of actually creating high-quality long albums. K-pop has a serious issue with albums right now, and I believe that the full-length album is dying out. Now, to some of you, this might be surprising, and to others, you're probably wondering why I'm even having the conversation because you may think it's so obvious. But I do think that the death of longer albums in K-pop is a problem because it actually hurts a lot of the artists more than it helps them. I think that these artists are able to come back more frequently because they are given less music, so quicker to perform, quicker to promote, and then they're able to come back with music that really should have been with the last comeback. And honestly, I think 2023 has been pretty good for K-pop so far. I thought 2022 is also pretty decent for K-pop, and I don't necessarily think a lot of these quick releases are automatically terrible because of how short they are, or the fact that they're followed with really small EPs or very short mini-albums. I still like the music, I just don't like the direction the music is going. A very prominent example of this is taking a lot of, rookies from 2022 or even some from 2023 and some newer artists in the fourth generation and looking at their album lengths and their comeback schedules. Now, the fourth generation of K-pop is interesting because it really came in at the height of social media, right? Like the third generation was there for social media, but much less than what the fourth generation has been accustomed to. Because of that, we see more and more and more groups being pumped out, some with negligible talent and others with a ton of talent. And that's the big thing that people miss when it comes to making albums is how talented the idols are who are recording the songs and potentially producing the songs. There's a difference between, self-made artists who write a lot of their own stuff, like a 17, and like a non-self-made artist who maybe they don't write as much as their stuff, like a lot of, newer rookie groups like an IVE, for example. Now, I don't necessarily think that self-made artists are better than non-self-made artists, but a lot of self-made artists tend to have more music than non-self-made artists. It's just a very common theme I see. The most obvious comparison I can make is BTS. When they debuted back in 2013, their debut mini-album had 7 tracks on it, including an intro, a skit, an interlude, and an outro. I do believe that intros, interludes, and outros are things that more groups should put on their albums to make them feel longer, because even though there was 7 tracks on Too Cool for School, there was realistically only 4 or 5 songs actually on here, including the outro. But even in the early days, BTS's albums used to extend from 8 to 9 up to 13 or 14 tracks on some mini albums, like not even just full-length albums, but actual mini albums. Now compare that to how much music is being put out now by rookies like IVE, New Jeans, LE SSERAFIM. Let's take one of the better examples like LE SSERAFIM, right? They have 2 EPs, being their debut EP Fearless and their comeback EP Anti-Fragile. Now, it is important to note that these are EPs, these aren't even albums, so EP stands for extended play, right? So they're basically just like really long single albums. But even with that being said, both of these EPs only really have 4 songs, not including their intro tracks, and they're quite short. They're pretty high quality, I like both of them, but they are very short. IVE quite literally has 6 original Korean tracks in their entire discography, and they've been around for over a year at this point. Now, they are finally getting an album coming up in April, but to me, it's like, it's about damn time. Like, I was someone who's advocating for IVE to get an album, like, last July, and I'm sitting here in March of 2023, still waiting for it. Now, it's not necessarily fair to really pin it all on rookies. There are some other more experienced groups that have seen a downturn in album length. But the problem with these newer rookie groups having less and less music is that there is less music for people to stream, so people tend to hop to different artists faster because they don't want to replay the same 4 songs over and over and over again. Shorter albums and single releases and EPs actively dissuade people from listening to your music. I think New Jeans' music is fantastic, right? But, with their debut EP and now with a single album on a comeback, it's like New Jeans doesn't feel like they have a ton of music. And look, all their songs are very good. OMG's great, Ditto's great, Hype Boy's amazing, Attention's great. But eventually I want to listen to some other shit. I feel like there's this really cool feeling of finding like a deep cut or a hidden gem like on an album for an artist, like a deep 9 songs into an album and you find like a fantastic song, right? You can do it with BTS, you can do it with twice as longer albums, but there's something about going down that album and like finding a really great B-side that's like deep into the album, right? A deep cut is what we like to call them. But that just doesn't exist anymore with new rookie groups and new 4th generation groups that are dropping albums that are like 4 fucking songs long that are EPs, right? There isn't a single deep cut for New Jeans. Every single one of their songs got an MV. Almost all of them got choreography or some sort of promotion or were performed like on an award show. There's no deep cuts for New Jeans, and that kind of sucks. I wish they had a full-length album that I could really enjoy a song like 8 songs into an album. And then there's another issue, the structure of albums. They are really falling apart in the 4th generation. There are less concept albums and more albums thrown together by, a mix of random producers and stuff just to get something out there. There are very few albums that come out every single year in K-pop that I truly think to myself, wow, these artists and these producers really cared about this album and the direction of the group. There just aren't a lot of those that come out. There were very few full-length albums that I even liked last year out of K-pop. A staple example of an album is like Jack in the Box. I talked about it in my recent J-Hope video, but that was my favorite album last year because not only does it push J-Hope's career forward, it also is a fantastic narrative piece. It's long, it has deep cuts on it, it's an actual fucking album. Another really popular group is like Stray Kids, right, in the 4th generation, and I'll try to be nice to them because I know how toxic their fan base can be, but some of their longer albums just do not feel incredibly well put together, especially this recent one, Maxident, which really let me down. I had super high hopes going into this album, and I was majorly disappointed. Now, Maxident is only 8 songs long, and it has a Korean version of a Japanese song that they put out, but even a lot of these, deeper songs like 3 Racha, which I very much hate that song. Super Bored, not very good in my opinion. Chill is okay. Taste is pretty good. Give Me Your TMI is pretty okay. But it just doesn't really feel like it's a very cohesive album put together. Ordinary was only 7 tracks long, even though that had a huge promotional window. And there are some like nicer deep cuts, like a Muddy Water at the very end, which I think is the best song on the entire album. But then there are songs like, Lonely Street, Waiting for Us, even Freeze to an extent that I just don't like nearly as much, that kind of just feel weird on here. And the thing with like non-self-made groups and even some self-made groups is that really their company is the ones that control a lot of the things when it comes to how many songs are on an album and all this stuff. So I'm not necessarily blaming the idols themselves. Like, I'm not out here saying, Bangchan, like, do a fucking better job. Like, that's what I'm saying. But in the 4th generation, we've seen an uptick of groups lack an actual identity for their concept, lack the ability to put together even a full length or even a mini album, lack the ability to actually put together a narrative within an album, put together concept albums, or even just put together an album that sounds cohesively distinct compared to everything else in the field, right? In fact, a lot of the really quality full-length albums I've gotten are albums from soloists in which that they write most of their own stuff on the album and maybe even produce a little bit of it. But if you want to find like really high quality albums in K-pop, soloists are the people to go to right now because groups just aren't doing them. I don't think that albums dying out in K-pop is something that should surprise me or surprise a lot of people, because now K-pop has moved towards TikTok, where they can make fun TikTok songs that are catchy, in which you can promote on the platform and get a lot of buzz from there instead. I remember a little while ago I said that IVE were not built to make an album. It was one of my big criticisms of them, because they've had 3 single albums from back-to-back-to-back comebacks, and it was really starting to worry me, because I was sitting here like, do they not have the maybe vocal ability to go on an entire album span, or like, what's the problem here? I do think more of this lies on the company rather than the actual artist. I think that they're vocally talented. They could definitely go on a 6 to 7 song run on an album, but I have yet to see that. We've gotten 3 single albums in a row. It started worrying me a little bit. I'm a little more at ease knowing that we're getting one, but it's still not a good look that you're an artist for over a year and a half at this point, and you have 6 Korean songs to show for it. While I believe that K-pop started out with the visual aspect being more important, I think that it has overwhelmed the music recently. Even back then in the 3rd generation, 2nd generation, yeah, visuals were important, but they still had to make music, and they still pumped out a ton of really long, high-quality albums. Every artist did. But nowadays, in the 4th generation, I think a lot of companies are starting to push their artists as being more of promotional performance material rather than actual artists. I don't want to sound mean to any of these companies specifically, but I do think some of these companies are just too fucking lazy to sit down and actually make a 10 to 12 song long album for their artists to showcase their vocal ability on. Because a lot of those deep cuts are what draw a lot of people into your music. Unfortunately, I don't think that K-pop is going to change in any aspect anytime soon. I think albums are going to keep getting shorter, and K-pop is going to still be played up for media play, and that's how it's going to be promoted. And don't worry, I still think there's great music that comes out, right? A lot of comebacks, especially in 2023 so far, have been great, but I do kind of worry about the actual artistry behind the craft at times, because, we have artists that are pumping out, 4-song long EPs, in which I'm sitting here like, this would have been a lot better if it was longer. A good example of this would be like in ITZY's Cheshire, which should have been so much longer than what it actually was. Tell me what you guys think down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? I'd like to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next video.